The major cities of the world are being destroyed one by the monsters. Moscow by Rodan, Beijing by Mothra, London by Manda, Paris by Baragon. And here's a special news bulletin. Godzilla is now in New York City. The city is being invaded by Godzilla. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Mel.
And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is episode 25 of season 5, and we are continuing our Summer of Kaiju, this time with one more classic Japanese kaiju movie, Destroy All Monsters.
Okay, so I'm going to start us off here with a little bit of background about Destroy All Monsters, and then I will give a very, very brief plot summary, and we can talk about our impressions. Listeners, I'm sure you could tell from the beginning where we listed our names tonight. It's just Matt and myself. Lisa's feeling a little bit under the weather and wasn't able to join us. And so I'm sure she'll be back for our next episode. But you've just got Matt and me tonight talking about this, I think it's safe to say, amazing movie, Destroy All Monsters. So this film came out in 1968. It was the 9th film in the Godzilla series of films, and it was initially intended to be the final one because there was a waning popularity of kaiju movies with audiences, except among children. But as we note in the doc, like even though they intended this to be the 9th film and the end, we see how that turned out because I think right now we're in like the 20s regarding Godzilla films. In one of the articles we read for this that was in Sci-Fi Wire, the writer talks about how in the early years, the Godzilla series did really well at the box office. So the 1954 film sold well over 9 million tickets. But by the time you get to the late 1960s, Son of Godzilla, which came out a year before Destroy All Monsters, had about 2.4, according to the article, million ticket sales. And even the rival studios, Daiei and Shochiku, who were also doing kaiju movies at the time and were kind of competing with Toho, their popularity was kind of waning as well. But as I said, children were still interested in these films. And so the series of Godzilla films continued for a while with a kind of an emphasis on maybe the child audience that they were kind of aiming for. And, people who are fans of Godzilla know that there have been different kind of phases in Godzilla's creative life, where there were movies in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And then, of course, he's back in the legendary and Warner Brothers and Toho's current MonsterVerse movies that started in, I believe it was around 2014 with the first kind of Godzilla reboot. So because this was intended to be the final one, they had a lot of people who had been with Godzilla in the early days come back. So the producer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, who I believe we mentioned in a mini episode, was producing. The director, Ishiro Honda, was back for this movie. Akira Ifukube did the score again. And I thought the music was really kind of cool because you get the Godzilla music, but there was a lot more kind of martial exuberant music with the militaries. And then Eiji Tsuburaya was not in charge of the special effects. That fell to Sadamasa Arakawa, but Tsuburaya was an advisor for the special effects. So one of the things I thought was really interesting is that there was a real kind of a traditional Godzilla feel to the movie. Now, in this movie, one of the articles that we read, well, both of them, compared it to like the bringing together of the Avengers and the Marvel Universe, because this was one of the first big crossover events in movie history as well, because you have 11 monsters. So, Mothra and Rodan had been in their own movies and with Godzilla, and they were back. Baragon was in his own movie, which I haven't seen. And so he comes from there. You had Gorosaurus, which apparently was in a King Kong movie. I mean, there was just there's 11 monsters. Even Varan made an appearance. So the costume was kind of falling apart because it'd been so long since Varan was in a movie. So you just saw him from afar. And of course, the big bad in this movie that's being controlled by aliens is the space kaiju king. I guess we'll call him Ghidorah. I've heard it pronounced Ghidorah and Ghidorah, so I guess we can go with Ghidorah, the massive kind of three-headed dragon, who, because he's a space monster, apparently speaks and beeps, which was a little irritating to me. But I mean, I guess that was to identify him against all the other animals or the other monsters. So you've got all these monsters who have been in Godzilla films and some who hadn't. I forgot about poor Manda, who was in the movie Atragon, which I actually watched for the first time recently, about a month ago. And that movie is a trip. Manda was much more effective in this movie, actually, I think. One last thing I think I want to say about kind of the background before I get into a brief plot and my thoughts is in one of the articles that I read, and I noticed this when I was watching it, Godzilla has his kind of softer look. That after the 1954 film and after a couple films, when he started being more of like a protector of people and not necessarily the big bad in his movies, they had a more trimmed down suit, which made it easier for the person inside the suit to move around. And they also gave him like a little bit more maneuverability. They softened up his eyes. They elongated his neck and kind of rounded his face. So he doesn't have as kind of a harsh dinosaur look as he had in 1954. And so you definitely have that kind of I guess like iconic Godzilla, you know, the meme where he's doing the jig and dancing. Like that's the type of maneuverability you've got here. One thing that I thought was interesting is there were some things in this movie that I think might have influenced the current MonsterVerse. So I don't want to give too many spoilers away because I know Matt hasn't seen some of the new movies with Godzilla. But Destroy All Monsters reminded me a little bit of particularly 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters, because there were a couple things I really loved about that movie. One was that you had a whole bunch of monsters in it, which reminded me of Destroy All Monsters. You have the idea of containment units, of course, with the creation of Monarch. And we have Monsterland here, where the monsters are contained in Destroy All Monsters. And you also have mind control of the monsters to use them for nefarious purposes, which also happens in Destroy All Monsters. And so, yeah, one of the reasons I really enjoy Godzilla King of the Monsters, besides this amazing score and its interesting, if slightly preposterous plot, was because of all the cool monsters that you get to see. And that just immediately popped into my head when I was watching Destroy All Monsters. So I don't know if that's something that was on purpose or if I'm just seeing a connection, but that was something that I was thinking about. Very brief. The movie starts out, we're in the year 1999. So it's their idea of what 1999 would be like, which is not what happened. So basically, there's world peace. The UN basically controls a lot. There's the UN Space Committee that controls space exploration. There's a lunar base, and astronauts are taking off from different places in Japan to go up to the lunar base and I guess do things and come back. There's an implication that they might have seen aliens. But the movie begins with talking about how all the kaiju have been collected on this island for their own well-being and that of man. So all these 11 monsters are shown living relatively happily on this island, and they have all of these, I suppose, humane, I'm not sure, ways of keeping them on the island. So there's like a magnetic field, and there's this repellent and various things that keeps them there so they can't do anything bad to humans and they could be studied. And they're also in the process, which is interesting if you think about 1954, when they killed all the fish to kill Godzilla, they're in the process of trying to make what they call aquaculture. And so it's this vibrant place where they're like trying to, get rid of pollution, all these fish, coral reefs, whatever you can think of that's making this paradisical. And the monsters can then go and eat fish, and they're like well taken care of. Everything is cool and fine. And then some pesky aliens who, even though they can only survive at super high temperatures and could never make Earth that hot, decide they want Earth for some reason that I don't think they ever explain. And they use mind control to turn the people at Monsterland against the government and to make the monsters, the people turn off the repellent and the fields and everything, and the monsters go off. And literally in this movie, the monsters are all over destroying the major cities of the world. And at one point, you have 4 monsters destroying Tokyo, and it is just completely destroyed and in ruins. And so the end of the movie is that the humans on Earth figure out how to disable this and use it for their own purposes to get the monsters to go to Monster Island and try to stop the aliens. And there's this huge throwdown fight between the 11 monsters and King Ghidorah. And after that, neither the aliens nor the humans have control of the monsters, and they don't know what's going to happen. And the monsters decide to help the humans. They kick the aliens out basically, and at the end, everything is happy and lovely again because they've gone to they stayed on the island, and everything's kind of fixed. So that is a brief description of the movie. Sadly, I don't think I missed a whole lot because those were the major points of the movie: was mind control and destruction. My impressions, as I told Matt before we started recording, I don't think I've ever seen this movie. There were parts of it that looked familiar to me, so I may have seen it when I was really young. But I felt like this was basically like seeing it for the first time because I didn't remember so much if I had seen it before. I also feel like if you've seen a lot of Godzilla films, you might start to feel like scenes are repetitive. I enjoyed it. I thought it was zany. I thought it was over the top at points. I felt like it moved fast, though. I felt like it was, entertaining, and that I guess something was always happening. There were some pretty serious plot holes that you could get lost in. But for me, I feel like when you come to a kaiju movie, you want to come for the monsters, and the monsters appeared very early in the film. And it was really interesting how it was all about, in a way, this movie was all about like, well, if you've got world peace, what's the new threat? Well, it's got to be aliens. But then it also kind of was like, not just that the world was working together, but maybe the monsters were working with the world. So I don't know. I felt like in some ways we lost some of the major themes that we had in our previous classic kaiju movies. But at the same time, maybe we have a new look. Like now we don't necessarily maybe have a parable about World War, but a parable about something else. I also just love seeing all the monsters. It was kind of fun. Obviously, they didn't have enough money to show us all the destruction, but what we saw was pretty good. I mean, not like I like destruction, that's good, but I mean, if you're watching a monster movie or a kaiju movie, that's what you're looking for. And I feel like it held up its end of the bargain for like, this is the end of the Godzilla series. We have all this money. We're going to make this last hurrah. I could totally see at the end of the movie when it closed out, like, yeah, that could be the end and we don't have any more. Matt, what were some of your impressions with this what's the word I'm looking for? Exciting movie.
Well, first, before I dive into my first impressions, I do want to make sure to set the record straight that I did not give, excuse me, I did not give my plague that kept me from being in the last episode to Lisa. We do live several hours away from each other. So
I should have made that clear. I'm sorry.
in case the listeners were wondering. but no, we are sad that Lisa's not able to join us. So we do hope that she gets better soon. Hopefully she should be back for our next episode. But to really answer your question, Mel, my first impressions were it's hard to put into words, I guess, what this movie is. But I will have to say, overall, I really enjoyed it. That would be my basic hot take, I guess, if you will, about this movie. I mean, I it's been a long time since I've really just sat and watched one of those like classic 60s kaiju movies. The ones that we've watched, like the original Godzilla was, it had a very different tone than I think these do, which were a little bit, like you said, Mel, a little more lighthearted. Godzilla was a little softer, and I'd forgotten how much I love it. Like from the models of the spaceships and the helicopters and the tanks and the cities and the destruction and everything. Like it was just a lot of fun. I will definitely second the don't the advice, I guess you'd say, of don't bring too much expectations if you watch this movie and haven't seen it before, because I mean, I did not go in expecting super high art, and I was not disappointed. I mean, The special effects are not the greatest, but they're really fun, and some of them look really good. But yeah, there are massive plot holes, and it's really I mean, like you said, Mel, the kind of point of a kaiju movie is giant monsters destroying things, and that's kind of, when you cut down to it, that's kind of it. And we got that, and we got it in spades. And I'd say my first impression of it is, yeah, I just really enjoyed watching it. I will also add this, because I haven't seen too many movies with Godzilla Jr., or I guess as he's known as, what is it? Minilla? Isn't that what his
I
name is?
guess it's Manila. I'm not
Manila?
100%
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I'd forgotten how he looks like he's sculpted badly out of Play-Doh. Like,
Yes. And what was that weird smoke ring he blew to like kill one of Ghidorah's heads? I was totally confused.
I we're skipping straight to the end with that question, and maybe we should revisit it. But yeah, I was completely perplexed by that as well. Like, throughout the movie, Godzilla has his atomic breath, and all of the monsters do their signature moves. I'm not really familiar with Godzilla Jr., or whatever, Manila, from his first appearance in Son of Godzilla. But yeah, he does this weird, like, it literally looks like a smoke ring that he blows out of his mouth, and it goes around one of Ghidorah's heads. And I I just had no idea what to make of that. I guess they had to, when you've got 11 monsters, they had to give him something to do, and that was it. I don't know.
I did appreciate how Godzilla was a good parent and kept him off to the side, safe in safety, while it all was going on, just to be sure he was okay.
Yeah, I don't even know. But yeah, I don't know where to go next in talking about this movie. I guess maybe we should kind of talk about the aliens themselves, because they are the source of the biggest plot hole. Like you said, Mel, they can only survive at these extreme heat and pressure. If they don't have it, if they get too cool, they turn into essentially rocks. I think they were, like, because they came from the asteroid belt, and for some reason they decide they want Earth and build a base under Mount Fuji. But they never really explain what it is about Earth and Mount Fuji. They literally, and I made note of this, when the UN sends the military to, like, go into the, like, try to like route them out from under Mount Fuji. They say, no, we are making a declaration. Earth is ours too now. And it's just like, okay, but why? Like, you don't, you never said why you want to be here. You just show up and are here. So I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't get that either, because it's like by saying two, I was like, do they want to try to live with them on Earth? Because they're trying to kill people. So I'm not sure. Like in Pacific Rim, the aliens are trying to terraform Earth so it would be good for them. So they didn't really care about the people, and made more sense to me. It made a lot more sense. This is just like, we want this planet we can't live on. Like they can only live in volcanoes. Maybe we could coexist,
Well,
Like,
they do say at one point, kind of in the beginning, that, like, they offer, basically they're like, we want to live in peace with you and share our technology. But they're like, then why are you using our monsters to destroy our cities? Well, some
mhm.
sacrifices have to be made, and that was it. So I didn't really understand the rationale of any of that, but it did make for some fun destruction scenes. But
And like, and we need to talk about this too, I'm sure, but like, this was way more of a monster movie than a people movie. Like, one of the articles, I think, said the characters were all flat, and I can't fault them with that. But there were two places where the aliens said these, like, just and she was almost talking in a monotone every time she would talk to them, but they said these like preposterous things, kind of like what you were saying about now we live on the earth too. At one point, over halfway through the movie, when they first go into the Mount Fuji base, she shows them like all this stuff through a screen in the rock wall. And bear in mind, they've seen their UFO, their spaceships. They've seen aliens at this point. They've talked to them like 3 or 4 times. They've seen their laser weapons. And over like a 3/4 of the way through the movie, the way she ends her speech, her this speech to them is, "Now, do you believe we are aliens?" And it's like, dude, I believed you were an alien like from the very beginning when you landed in a spaceship. And then right
Yes.
right before when they drop Ghidorah on him, she calls them up just to say what something to the effect of, we've sent King Ghidorah and he will defeat your monsters. And then she says, I'll be back in touch when you're ready to give up.
That was some high quality villain monologuing there. I have to
I
say.
know. I mean, that was intense. She was just convinced that it was over at that point.
Well, and I do have to wonder in that first scene you mentioned where she said, "Now do you believe we're aliens?" I mean, we are watching this subtitled because neither of us speaks fluent Japanese or really any Japanese. So,
Right.
so I do wonder if some of that could have been a translation issue. I don't know how much to put that on translation because, I mean, this is it's a kaiju movie from the 60s. I mean, they're not known for stellar scripts, but I mean, I do wonder if some of that could have been a translation issue as well, to give them some credit here.
That is true because I too watched it with subtitles, but I know some of the when I was looking up different quotes online, even from the dubbed ones, like yeah, I could totally see how that's the case. But I don't
uh,
know. I mean, that's pretty. She's a cool customer, when she's like, "Yeah, I'll be in touch when when
yes.
you're ready to give up." I'm like,
Well, I was
they
even
definitely thought they were superior.
I was even thinking of there was an anime that I had watched years ago when back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and it came to Netflix a couple of years ago. And I always just leave subtitles on, or captioning, I guess, on Netflix. I'm one of those people that doesn't mind it, and sometimes it helps if I, miss a word or two, I can read it on the screen. And I noticed pretty quickly that the version that I was watching was dubbed. So it had the dubbed English and then the captions, and they didn't match up. Like there were times where they were saying completely different sentences that had very similar meanings, but the words were completely different. So
Oh
I do
no.
I did if I after I really noticed that, I did change it to the Japanese audio just so that I wasn't confusing myself by listening and reading. But that's what kind of what made me think of the translation issue is that. But again, it's very possible that she was saying something with very similar sentiment in the original Japanese, and that's just, I mean, that's just the way that it is. I mean, this is a movie where we did watch a spaceship fly straight up and then turn 90 degrees with its thrusters still firing 100% of the time, but it just rotates instead of, if you know anything of physics, if those thrusters were firing, it would still be moving in space along with the rotation. But no, it was stationary. It just rotated. So, I mean, I don't think realism it was the first order of business here. I think it was getting 11 monsters on the screen and fighting each other and then fighting a common threat.
Matt, maybe it's that you don't believe they're aliens because they can violate the laws of physics.
Oh no, that was the Earth spaceship. That was the Earth spaceship when it was taking off
Oh
from the
yeah,
moon.
yeah. The Earth, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was pretty hard to believe. Yeah, I just didn't believe the Earth spaceship at all. It looked like kind of like an airplane, and it could fly like an airplane. And then it also was a spaceship going to the moon.
Well, and then
And they had to keep their suits on when they were in space, but there was no visible oxygen or anything that the suit was doing.
and the helmets looked basically like they took construction hard hats and put clear plastic visors on them. I mean, that's basically all it was. So, I mean, the visor wrapped around their whole head, I guess. But I mean, you kind of, if you haven't seen this movie, you may have to just Google an image of it because it's hard to describe. But I mean, costuming was not, I mean, it was not done for realism either.
Yeah, it definitely was not what we were wearing in 1999. I can say that with certainty.
But that said, I mean, I absolutely love the like the scale miniatures that they use for these sorts of things. I love the scale cities and the models that they use, and especially when you've got the monsters attacking Tokyo and all of the defense systems activate, and you've got these little bitty missile systems that are all popping up out of like the ground, and I mean it's so obviously fake, but it looks really good too. So it's just, I don't know, you could do some really good stuff with model effects, as George Lucas would go on to show not that much later with Star Wars. I mean, a lot of the original Star Wars effects were done with models, and a lot of other movies use them as well to really good effect. So I just love those scale miniatures there. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, they were so intricately done. And I felt like, in particular, when they were showing the monsters attacking other places and it was on like the black and white TV screen, because the movie's in color, but sometimes when they would show the monsters destroying other places like New York or Paris or whatever, the miniatures were almost a little bit more believable because of the grayscale, I felt. Yeah, the one, like you said, the ones in Tokyo in particular, it was like just glaringly obvious, but at the same time, it was really cool. Like it just really worked. Like when Mothra was in larval form the whole time, I guess, because maybe it would have cost more money to make her into the full-on moth in this. It helped though, because she got to blow like some cocoon stuff with the spider blowing web to try to stop Ghidorah. But when she burst through the subway, I thought that was really effective, because I almost like the rather when Godzilla comes out, he's going to stomp on stuff, and when Mondo was on the bridge, I knew he was going to break it. But I thought that was pretty cool, having Mothra kind of come from underground and come out through that subway hatch or subway tunnel. Yeah, I like the special effects. They were really interesting. Like the this is getting toward the end, so we don't have to talk about it now. But the way they use the UFO to mimic a monster at the end with the fire, I thought that was interesting as well. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Matt, is we both said that the movie kept our attention and we enjoyed watching it. But at the same time, I was often confused by the people in the movie. Like the aliens had absolutely no backstory. I couldn't even, if I remember correctly, it was all women, actually. The Killax, I think was what they were called. There was no explanation as to why it was all women. There was no explanation as to who these people were. We think they came from an asteroid. I mean, even when they would, I guess they're evil and they don't have to tell you where they came from, but there was no development of their culture or why they want to come. And even with the main characters, like in the very beginning, the captain of the spaceship that can like go all over the place and defy laws of physics goes to the moon for like a tour of duty or something. And this woman, Kyoko, she goes to Monsterland to work there. And so that's the connection. And they're having a call, like a Zoom call, I guess, between like the moon and Monsterland. And that's when all this goes down at Monsterland, and he has to go back and see what's going on. I couldn't maybe I missed something, but I couldn't tell how they knew each other. Like, were they supposed to be related? Were they in a relationship? And then like when she turned evil, when her mind was being controlled, it was weird. Like he just completely turned on her. Like there was no like, you used to be Kyoko. Like he was yanking her around. I mean, he was kind of painfully yanking her around, especially when he realizes how she's being controlled and pulls the earrings out of her ears. Like I didn't feel, even though I was into it, I felt like I was more looking forward to what the monsters were doing, because there wasn't a lot of depth to the characters. And even when I thought I saw a relationship between a couple characters, it didn't seem consistent to me.
I think that's a very fair assessment of it. I I thought she did a really good job when she was being mind controlled by the aliens of portraying like a different I don't know how to put it into words, but like she looked physically different, like facially she was doing different things with her face so that she looked like a different person, kind of, if that makes sense.
Oh no, yeah, I noticed that too.
And so I mean, I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that was a really fruitful idea that they could have done a little bit more with if the relationship between them had been maybe a bit clearer. Because yeah, I was confused too. Like I assumed at first that they were in some sort of romantic relationship, but then I realized, I was like, well, why am I even assuming that? I don't know. I mean, this could be like they could be brother and sister, or cousins or something, like they could just be family members. And nothing that we were given pointed in any direction as to how they knew each other or were related. So I don't know what to make of that, to be honest. I mean, of course, you're going to have people and human characters in a kaiju movie, but I mean, they really did feel like more of an afterthought than anything. Like, how can we get this plot going? Let's have people. He's on the moon. She's on Monsterland. Go. So that's
Yeah, that's how it felt. I think the most character development we got, or the most interesting moment with people, were the guys on the spaceship, especially when they went into the base under the mountain and the aliens were trying to burn their ship, which it kind of did burn the model a little bit, which I thought was kind of amusing because it's supposed to be metal, but whatever. But when they take the rover out and they like fight back the aliens and they break their shield and they're like trying to destroy the mind control thing, which I didn't know why they didn't just shoot the actual mind control thing. Like they burn out their stuff trying to go through the metal underneath of it. But that was like, I actually felt invested in them. And I felt like each of the crew members started to have a slightly different personality. I mean, it wasn't deep by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt like they were kind of being developed in that moment. And it made me sad that we hadn't gotten much development with them before that. Because I mean, before that, they basically just were going off with like one-liners that, kind of stock characters would say. Like, what was it, one time they were like, should we do this? Should we go after this UFO? And they're like, yep, we'll either be heroes or be in body bags. But I feel like when they were actually in the base, we got to see a little bit more personality from the people. And then it went back to the monster throwdown with Ghidorah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it really, I like the way you said that, like they almost felt like stock characters. I think that's a good way of describing pretty much everyone in this movie as kind of a stock character. Oh, you've got the scientist, you've got the adventurer, you've got the female lead who ends up in some sort of peril, or in this case, mind controlled. Yeah, I mean, they were all just sort of stock characters. But I do agree that, like you said, they did have that the guys in the spaceship did get a little bit more development. But yeah, overall, I mean, everyone was fairly two-dimensional, or even one-dimensional in some cases. I don't want to shift to the end just yet, because I did want to make one other comment about how quickly the monsters seem to travel, because the time scale on this movie is really hard to follow. Like it feels like it's happening in like the whole thing happens over like 2 days maybe. And in fact, you never see any time where it's nighttime. It's always daytime. So it could even all be the same, like afternoon almost. But like as soon as the defenses on Monsterland are taken down by the aliens, and all the monsters are controlled, it's like suddenly, like, boom, there's one attacking Moscow, there's one in Paris, Godzilla's in New York, like that. They're just everywhere on the planet, and it's like, how did they all get there so fast? It's like they just sort of teleported there or something. That was,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, that was just a one moment where I really had a hard time suspending disbelief. So
I wondered the same thing because in other Godzilla movies, like especially, I'm trying to think of the title of the one I'm thinking about, but this happens a few times where people are being attacked by a monster on the Japanese mainland and they want Godzilla to come help, and it takes him the whole like three-quarters of the movie to swim there. Or Mothra. It took Mothra a long time to swim to help the twins and Mothra, and that happens in other movies. And yeah, you're right. It was like they teleported. I almost wondered if we were supposed to believe that the aliens helped them get somewhere, but literally, Monsterland's defenses are down, and like you said, like 5 or 10 minutes later, they're like, you know, oh my God, Rodan is destroying Moscow. And I'm like, what? And then like Godzilla made it to New York in no time at all. So they really didn't explain it. And then when they come to get Tokyo, it's really not that long either because they're like, well, why didn't they attack anywhere in Japan? And it turns out that they were trying to get rid of the rest of the world's defenses before they kind of came back to where the aliens were. But even the way Godzilla went from New York to Tokyo was really quick as well. So yeah, that really that really stretched my belief too. I mean, I know they were probably doing that, I guess, so they could make sure they get all the city destruction in, but it just seemed way too fast. So I don't know if, I read, I think it was in one of the articles that we had in our doc, but Honda apparently had more that he wanted to do in the movie, and he just couldn't do it for time constraints and financial reasons. And I'm wondering if some of these plot holes, maybe they had an idea how to fill it, and it just was like, we need to get all this monster destruction in, and so we just can't deal with that. Because yeah, there was some stuff that was just like, I'm not sure about that.
fair enough. I could see that being like the budget constraints being an issue. I mean, this movie, though, I mean, it is a tight 90 minutes. Like, it's exactly an hour and a half, pretty much. So,
Yeah, I was like, when is this big monster thing going to happen at the end? And it does. Oh, I had a quick question for you. What did you think of the fact that they were, and there's no like definitive answer to this, but what did you think of the fact that they were imagining one, world peace in 1999 after we talked about the war themes in the other Godzilla movies? And then two, that the UN is in control of everything. I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that the UN not only has control of militaries and space, but it also has a secret police. And that disturbed me, but I didn't know if it was a translation issue or not.
I thought it was definitely interesting. Well, and part of me wonders too if some of that world peace wasn't accomplished by humanity banding together to fight this external threat of the kaiju, like in getting them all located to Monsterland. I keep wanting to call it Monster Island, but it's Monsterland. In getting them all relocated there, I mean, I wonder if some of that was a cooperative effort that ended up leading to world peace. But the other thing is, yeah, I don't know about the UN. I guess, well, I guess in the 60s, the UN still had a lot more promise and potential that people thought of it. Like, not to sit here and bash on the UN, but here in 2021, it has, I mean, it does seem largely, um, what's the word I'm trying to say? Just for appearances, I guess, or it's not as effective as I think it was intended to be or envisioned being when it was created. It's not a global government. It does, I mean, it does do things, but it's not as effective as we were expecting or wanting it to be when we formed it after World War II. And I mean, I wonder if some of that is just because of the post-war, the 60s. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of attributed that the UN as the major global body because of the time period personally.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, and but it also got me thinking about, and I think I think we talked about this at some point when we talked about, how U.S. movies would sometimes represent radiation, and the Japanese films are representing radiation. And this is just me thinking. I didn't find this anywhere, but I also wondered. Yes, the UN is like the obvious one to do, and the secret police thing might also suggest some skepticism as well. But I was wondering if this was and I don't want to be formulaic, but I think if this was a US movie, I don't know that the world peace would have been achieved through the UN. Or I don't know if that would have been necessarily a good thing. I thought it was interesting that, we're looking at the world through a different lens. And while New York is in the movie, it's more, and we do see Americans working in Japan to help on Monster Island. It's very like multinational, and very much like the UN isn't like one country in power. And I wondered if that seems slightly like a different worldview to me than what an American film would have done. I'm not sure that an American film would have put the UN in that position. I feel like by looking at it through a country that in America, we don't see as like a superpower, we ended up maybe with like a more interesting representation of what multinational cooperation could be. And I don't want to give this movie like way more significance than it deserves, because it is a monster mashup movie. But I wondered if that was part of it, that we're looking at what world peace would look like through a different lens, maybe, than what America would show.
I can definitely see that. I would agree with that for sure. That, I mean, it's hard to, in Japan in the 1960s, see, it would be hard for them to say we are the ones that brought about world peace because of their position in the world and global politics at the time. Not that they were completely a third world country, but I mean, especially in the 60s, it was dominated by the US and Russia, or I guess the Soviet Union. So yeah, I guess it does make a nice end run around the Cold War, and show how, it's a global cooperation, not just the US, not just the Soviet Union. It's all the countries headed by the UN. But I totally agree that this definitely is probably, I'm saying definitely and then probably. It's most likely coming about because of like you said, being a different lens. I agree that I don't think we would have seen this in an American movie, especially from the time period.
Yeah, and I like what you said about how it's an end run or a neat little run around the Cold War. Like, yeah, when you think about it from the 60s perspective, the world is kind of bifurcated. And it's interesting that Japan, like in Mothra, Japan had this conflict between, these two kind of powers, and they had the one country that could be a stand-in for America and Russia because they didn't, or Soviet Union, because they didn't want to kind of spell that out. And yeah, you're right. I mean, they're kind of like, oh, so this is what's going on now in the 60s with this kind of dualistic look at the world. Well, in 1999, neither of these superpowers are going to be in charge. So yeah, it's really interesting to think of it in that way. And in some ways, maybe that's a relation back to 2006's the Host that Lisa and I talked about, like looking at America through a different lens. All right, let's step away from the characters and talk about the monsters.
Yes, I think we should. I think we've got to move on to the meat of this.
What did you think of the monster battles?
I liked it. I especially liked when all of them came together after they were stopped being mind controlled. But I feel like when King Ghidorah came down, man, he got his butt kicked so fast.
Well, he had 11 monsters against him.
Right? Like, it just, like, I was like, I know he's the big bad, and they've called him out as like If this were wrestling, he's the guy running out of from outside the Coliseum to as a surprise, that kind of thing, to jump in the ring and to start wailing on people. But like, man, Godzilla was just like, nope. And just like grabs him, and I mean, they just destroyed him. And I felt a little bad for him. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, yes, he was trying to kill him, but I was like, man, that was just wow. That was a butt kicking there.
Yeah, he comes in all big and bad, like, remember me from my movie, and then like 5 minutes later, he's done.
Yeah, like well, I mean, it was baby Godzilla's smoke ring that did it, really, I think. But
I felt sorry for, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name, Anguirus, the one with all the spikes, like a spiky turtle thing, that he got picked up in the air and dropped. I felt bad for him, but he survived.
I straight up thought that they were going to kill him because he got picked up and dropped like that. Like, he left a crater in the ground.
I did too. I was like, please don't kill him.
I liked him. Yeah, I didn't want him to die. But no, he did survive the fall. But I was like, man, that was pretty brutal. I do have to ask too, because you mentioned earlier as well with the spider kaiju who was during the battle spraying webbing or whatever on King Ghidorah. It really, I don't think it looked like he had taken a fire extinguisher. It was just spraying a fire extinguisher on him. It didn't look anything like webbing at all to me.
It didn't. And there was one point where he was spraying the good monsters more, and I swear Godzilla just had this look like, cut it, like, stop, like, you're not helping.
Yeah. Poor guy. But
it was pretty awesome when they all held him down, so the one could like ninja kick him in the back. Like, that was impressive teamwork. Yeah.
That like kangaroo kick thing that he did was pretty amazing. I loved it.
I was surprised at the brutality when they were finally killing Ghidorah. It wasn't just the smoke ring, but like Godzilla was literally just stomping on one of his heads.
Yeah, like
it was intense.
They didn't kill what was the spiky guy's name? Anguirus? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
They didn't kill him, but man, I mean, they killed King Ghidorah. Like, he was 100% dead at the end of that movie. Like, yeah, it was pretty brutal. And yeah, Godzilla does basically step on one of his heads or his neck. It was something, but I liked it. I think it definitely kind of lived up to that hype of getting all of these monsters together, kind of thing.
It really did. And, and I think, I don't know, this is probably a super obvious point, but I thought it was cool that they had the monster, because at first the monsters are going at Ghidorah one by one and they're not faring so great. And then you see them realize, we got to do this together. And they all start working together, and they do great, obviously, because it's like, I said 11 earlier, but I guess Ghidorah is the 11th. So it's like 10 monsters on him. And the other thing I thought, and I think that kind of mimics the idea of like the world working together. Like, you have the monsters working together, these monsters that may have been against each other in previous movies, but they realize, like the humans realize the Kilaaks are a threat. They realize that they're a threat and that Ghidorah is a threat. And then I thought it was interesting too, I don't know what to do with this, but like the whole movie is the aliens and the humans fighting over control of the monsters. And when the monsters aren't under anyone's control, they choose to kick the aliens off of Earth. And that kind of in some ways goes back to that idea we talked about with the first Godzilla movie, of Godzilla as like he's, the reason he comes up there and starts eating people is because these bombs, the tests going on around him that woke him up and are killing his fish and messing up the Earth. And he kind of comes back almost as like a vengeance. And if this was the end, you not only have monsters and man coexisting with each other, monsters and man coexisting together, but you have, the monsters defending Earth against the aliens because they know who the enemy is. And I thought that was an interesting way Yes, like you said earlier, it's like the classic kaiju where the idea is the destruction and the monster fight, as opposed to the original 1954 movie. But it almost seems like it's a circle that we end in a different and much more hopeful place at the end of Destroy All Monsters than we started with 1954's Godzilla.
Well, and I think that's a great point. I think that's a really great point about, especially about the monsters once they're completely free from anyone's control, making the same decision to defend Earth. And I'm trying to remember the ending because at the very end, it shows all the monsters back on Monsterland, but I'm trying to remember if it actually showed those defense systems to keep them in place or not. And I don't remember seeing them, but that doesn't mean that they weren't there. So I mean, I don't want to read too much into that, but it's almost like it almost felt like they willingly went back to Monsterland so that they wouldn't destroy the rest of the Earth for the humans. Just kind of we'll hang out here. We're cool. We've got all our food and stuff that we want. Y'all do the rest over there, and we'll stay out of each other's way. We're good.
Yeah, I got that impression too. I can't, I would have to look at the end again to see if the defense mechanisms were there. I don't remember them talking about them though when they took their last helicopter ride, over and saw that they were back and happy. And yeah, I don't know. I choose to believe that there are no pesticides or whatever that was, or magnetic fields, and that the monsters are just coexisting on their little spot, and the people are in their area, and everybody's happy. I appreciated that Monsterland didn't become a theme park. I'm glad they didn't take the Jurassic Park route and bring people in. I liked the way it ended.
Yes, yes, I did too, and I'm choosing to believe the same thing, that the because it was ambiguous enough. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna choose to believe that the monsters willingly went back to the island, and everybody on Earth is peacefully coexisting, including the kaiju now. So instead of having to be contained, everybody's cool. Well, I guess we've kind of come to the end of the movie there. Literally, we're describing the final scene as it sort of pans out, and then the credits start to roll, and it says the end. So I don't know if there's that much else to say about this movie. I will leave us with this last thought, though, that it really, if you like kaiju movies, it really is, I'd say, a really good one. There's a reason why this sits pretty high up there in the rankings when people rank the best kaiju movies. This one's usually up in the top numbers, because I mean it's just fun. I mean, what else can you expect from 11 monsters fighting each other and then fighting one big bad threat? It's definitely worth the watch. So if you haven't seen it yet, and it is on HBO Max. I think it's also on Tubi. So there are a couple of different ways, and Tubi is free with ads. So there are a couple of ways for you to watch it if you're interested. But I'll just go ahead and close us out by just reminding you that we are at No Fearcast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page as well. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts about this movie or kaiju in general, please send us an email. We love getting emails from our listeners. And if you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to exclusive content that we produce in the weeks in between our main episodes. Or you can also just rate and review us, which is entirely free, but does help other listeners find us. Theme music is by Nicholas Gasparini. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.